and we will go ahead and start. Oh, I have to bounce back and forth between screens, which is very difficult, is it not? So I can see the full agenda. I should have printed it, huh? Hold on. Okay, we're going to start with number 1, recognition of progress, achievements, and improvements. I believe, Scott, that you have something to report here.
Yes, ma'am. Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Scott Jones. We have what we feel like is a pretty big win here. As everyone knows, there's a lot of focus or a lot of concern about how much of a burden reporting and time and effort is on our LEAs for requirements that we have at this level. So at your direction, ma'am, I'd like to turn it over to Paula Plant to first recognize the achievement that we've made, which is significantly reducing the requirements or the burdens, if you will, on our LEAs related to the school land trust programs and processes. So she'll explain that first, and then we'll have Jen Yates from IT and Chuma from IT just basically show what that means, the so what of it as far as the new online system or the new website that we have going now for our LEAs to use for the state land trust process. So, ma'am, if without further ado, I guess, can we turn it over to Paula so she can give us the good news? Yeah,
I do want to just say something about Paula and her team, Natalie and such, that I have to do, or I'm part of the trust lands, and it has just become better and better over the last few years. Even the trainings, and they're all available. They just did a training online. Anyway, it's really been an amazing feat what they have been doing. So, Paula, go ahead.
Paula?
Paula, you're on mute. So start over, Miss Paula.
Sorry. So in your packet, there is a piece of backup information that kind of refers to this. I just want to let you know that there was a performance audit with the Office of the Legislative Auditor General that was released last year in December. And one of the items in the audit encouraged generally a coordination of data gathering and trying to create efficiencies and decreasing duplication. So when we started into this discussion about redoing the website, we referred to that and tried to think about how we could integrate current reporting processes that are already happening into the website, so it drew data into the website instead of requiring an additional entry. So one of those applications is through the Utah Public Education Finance System that will prevent a business administrator from entering the financial data annually. The program will just draw from that entry. We're grateful because it will also reduce the errors that we were running into. In addition, we will be drawing information from Cactus so that schools do not need to enter that information on their school pages. Again, this is an elimination of duplicative data, and new schools will be added through that system as well. So we make sure that we have all of that correct. In addition, in this process, we are eliminating a progress report and the principal's assurance form. We've taken the pieces of those two forms that are important and integrated them into the other forms. So we will be eliminating 3 reports through this process. There are a couple of other things that we've tried to do that have come from conversations with auditors, one having to do with the calculation of the distribution. It was pointed out to us that it's a lot of money for an individual to do on a spreadsheet, and it might have worked well when it was $5 million, but it's probably not the appropriate application any longer. And I think Jen is going to show you a little bit about how we plan to do that. There are some other parts of the website that we're excited about having happen, and just want to tell you that we're so grateful to this team. They're an awesome team that Jared and Chuma have put together. Jen and Navneet and Ganesh and Chelly are our team members, and they've been very receptive to our requests to do streamlining, and we're grateful to all of their help. And I think Jen now will kind of show you what's happening in the actual website.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you to the Finance Committee for inviting us to share our progress with you today. I am glad that she talked about Navneet, Ganesh, and TC. They deserve all the credit here too, and I know they're listening in. So,
Jen, will you tell us what your role function is?
Yes, I am an IT program manager over the School Land Trust team.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll go ahead and share my screen if I can. Oh, it says I cannot share my screen while other participants are sharing. So here we go. Now I will try it. Thank you. Share. All right, so I'm hoping that you all can see my screen here. Board member Belknap, you mentioned that you use the site, so you should be familiar with the look and feel. As you can see, we've retained the look and feel to keep this transition seamless to our users. This is me logged in as a test user in our test environment as a USBE administrative user. And so one of the main areas that we've focused on at first was to build a new user role management system. This will give Paula and her team more of a refined ability to control user roles and management, whereas in the existing site, it's somewhat limited. And so I'd like to walk you through a little bit of that workflow so that I can then show you how exciting it is that we've been able to create a new user type and show you some of the streamlined pages that Paula had mentioned. So as you can see, I can come into this approve access screen here, and anyone who has requested LEA or school access as they've registered from the site, I can go ahead and approve or deny them. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and approve Tim Davis. He's our colleague. Thanks, Tim, for letting me use you as a test case here. So I've submitted that, and in this hypothetical scenario, I know that this person at Cass District is going to need approval rights at the LEA level. So I'm going to go ahead and give him that role as an LEA administrator, but I also know that he is a charter authorizer over InTech Collegiate Academy. So I'm going to go ahead and give him that role here too as well and save this. And I'll come back over here to our main site and go into the assignments area where I can ensure that he has been assigned access to the correct LEA. And I've assigned him earlier, he's approved. I can also deny individuals here or suspend them. So I'll go ahead and deny this person, we don't need them. And what I want to do now is, because he's been assigned that charter authorizer role, I want to go ahead and also assign him InTech Collegiate Academy. So I'll come here to assign and type in his username. Oops. And I need to, we saw this, Paula, where we want to click on this little square here and add user. He's approved, and I'm going to save that. So he now has access to Cass District as an LEA admin, and he's a charter authorizer. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to go ahead and sign out as a USBE admin, and I'll sign in now as that Tim Davis test user account. So you can see what, this is a brand new role that we've created. Now you can see, because he's been assigned both LEAs, he comes to this landing page where he'll not only have access to Cache District, but Intech Collegiate Academy. And if I am to click on either one of these screens here, you'll see he's got access to the school's dashboard for all of Cache District schools. And the same would be true if I came back out and I clicked on Intech Collegiate Academy. So we'll have access to the school dashboard information. They'll be able to view all of the council membership information and the school plan information. So this is a good area for me to show you how the school information here and the principal information here is now streamlined with Cactus. We are pulling that live from Cactus, whereas in the existing system, these numbers and names were very out of sync with our internal system. So this is now streamlined. Principal information, again, coming straight from Cactus. And one way we've leveraged that is in this council membership and signature form. I'll go ahead and click here. And you can see Paula has mentioned we've also incorporated the principal assurance statement in this form, so they don't have to be opening unnecessary screens. If I wanted to click on principal director here and add a council membership, I can do that, and we've pre-populated it with the principal information there, so I can submit this. So this is one of the pages that we've built. We do have some validation messages here, so we're sticking with the rules that say, you know, you have to have a certain number of individuals and different types of individuals on your community council. The information coming from Cactus is going to be critical in us achieving our interface with UPEFS, which Paula touched on, that Utah Public Education Finance System. We are in the process of building the school plans, which will open up the final report. And in that final report, there is the expenditures data. I can't demonstrate that here now, but I did want to kind of toggle over to the existing site to give you an idea of what kind of duplicate effort this will be eliminating. So you can see here, business administrators actually come into the existing site and they have to hand key this data. And it's very cumbersome on the user. They're already entering this data into UPEFS. So we're going to eliminate this process here, and instead we're going to draw that data in directly from UPEFS so that we're reducing entry errors and we're eliminating that extra burden for them to have to come in and enter in that data. Another thing that Paula touched on was the distributions calculation. So I'm going to go ahead and log in again as my USBE admin user, and I'll show you a little bit about that. We have replicated the existing workflow that requires, for example, the USBE admin users to upload a spreadsheet of funding data. So here I can choose a file. I've got an Entheos test file on my desktop, and I'll go ahead. This is a CSV. We can upload that, and I've got just some test values in there. It's not realistic data, but currently that's how the distribution amounts come into the website. We actually have a proof of concept from the minimum school program application where we can automate this calculation. And so in a future phase, in a future release of this project, what we'll be doing is probably building that API so that then we can deliver those results from MSP over here and we get rid of a spreadsheet upload. And in that case, we can utilize all of the auditability and the history tracking and user date timestamps of these existing systems that we have here in-house. And so I believe that's what I really wanted to demonstrate for you all today. Just really excited to be a part of this team, and thank you so much again. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
If you and Paula will just stay for a minute. Board members, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask to Jen or Paula? I've been writing questions. I see.
Negative.
Hold on.
This is Board Member Nielsen, by the way.
Okay. You have questions, Scott, or not?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. Chair Huntsman?
I just have a comment and maybe a question. Somewhere, and maybe Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones can keep score on this, but this betterment of reducing redundancy and streamlining systems and that, somewhere I think it'd be really nice to be able to inventory that or keep track of it and just start listing them out. At times it's very cyclic. I've heard it my whole time at the State Board of Education. There's too many reports, and then we get into it and we go, well, yeah, it's between the feds and the legislature and compliance, and yeah, we're in that compliance and report business. But I think it would be nice, and maybe Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones could comment on this, is let's start keeping track of the little betterments as they're being rolled out, that through systems that we're able to accomplish this, and it will help us with our story and everyone's story as we're moving forward with USIMS and other things that again go to the space of minimizing redundancy. I don't think Jan or Paula want to comment too much on it, because they've already commented. We already know the good stuff that's happening, but should we, or how do we go about doing inventory and those things?
Chair Huntsman, before he does that, that's actually part of the question that I had. Are the uploads from the UPIPs because of the USIMS and what we're doing there? And then on top of that, Chair Huntsman's question, Scott.
Okay, so for the first question on the UP, well, I know Chair Huntsman asked the question first, but ma'am, for your question on UPIPs, my understanding is no, it's not because of USIMS per se, but holistically, we're looking at the same results with other systems in the future with USIMS. Let me just pause right there and make sure I said that correctly. Chuma, Jan, Chuma, are you on? You're on, right?
Yes, I'm on.
Did I say that right?
Yes, you did, sir. You did say
All
that
right.
right.
So does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, then to Chair Huntsman.
Yeah. This way, just real quick on this, what we're showing you here is the future. Systems oriented, reducing the burden on the LEAs where we can pull information or, provide streamlined methodologies or methods within the system so that it reduces their workload. Now to Chair Huntsman's question, sir, yes, absolutely, I am keeping score. And as a result of this, I will say Deputy Superintendent Jones 1, Auditor 0. So no, I'm kidding on that. But so what we're trying to do is ahead of the legislative session, and you'll see this when we tee up the PMR, the monthly report that we give on USIMS that we gave to the bill sponsors here just recently. Is yes, sir, absolutely. So by the time we get to the legislative session, my request of Ben Leishman and if the PEA chairs will be, let us have some time to demonstrate to you all the differences we're making for our LEAs in those sense, either reducing reports or workload or impacts. So that's the glide path we're on. Because if you recall, Representative Gibson on PEA really, gave me a good stare down, from his seat up there, and he said, Scott, you've got to do better. Telling us what you're doing, what you're accomplishing. I hear you are, but we got to come forward, and that's fair, and I said, sure, you bet. We'll make sure. So that's where we're headed into the next legislative session. But then also too, we'll keep the board apprised of all the great successes we're having. It's not perfect. We stumble a bit now and then, but yes, sir, we're keeping score, and we'll be able to chart and show all the hours we save or money or different things like that, just depending on what the impact is. Does that answer your question, sir, through the chair?
Can I follow up, Chair Belknap?
Yes.
So Yes, it does, but I think that we should be calling it something because this is a big agency. There's a lot of money, and there's a lot of these places where these, I call them betterments, but it's almost like going to the optometrist. They go stick that thing on your head and you go better, worse, are we getting to the better? And every time we have a betterment, whether it's this may seem small, but I'm excited about it. It is a betterment, and it is reducing inputs, and it is streamlining. And so, not just a win-loss, but an inventory of in this space that with these adjustments, it did minimize redundancy. And then another list and another. I'm sure you're probably keeping an inventory, but it would be nice to call it something catchy, so that in every department, everything that we have going on at USBE, as these betterments are rolling out with IT, Chuma and everybody's fingerprints on them, there is a story to be told, and it is about progress. And again, it's not about perfection, because I don't think we'll ever get there, but are we moving the needle to a better place, yes or no? And to be able to show the needle with data, I think is really relevant. So maybe sometime we can come up with a name of what we're calling all of this agency-wide, but
be clever, but not too clever.
Understood, ma'am. Yes, no, I got it. I'll come back with it in the next meeting if I may. I understand what you're saying, sir. We're on it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, did you have a question?
No, I didn't. I was just getting my technology put together here.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Newell. Okay, I have a question. Paula, do you have a breakdown of the amount of money per student that is given or was given this year?
Yes, and that is included in the backup in your agenda. I think for requests for information, it's there, but I'll tell you what it is.
I knew it was there. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, this year the average per pupil is $133.21. The estimate for next year is $139, and of course that will depend a little bit on the enrollment count that you all discussed yesterday. So that's the reason we just have that as an estimate.
Thank you so much. I think that's pretty exciting when you think about a high school and they get an additional $133.21 per student to do what parents may want in their school to have happen. I appreciate that. I have one other question. You said something about a principal's assurance. Are assistant principals ever allowed to be the person who gives that insurance, or is it always the principal?
The system is set up so that more than one individual can have access to a school. And so in some cases, it's not necessarily the principal who enters any of those forms, but they would enter it on behalf of the principal.
Behalf of them. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry, Paula?
No, but thank you so much for the time. We're really excited about this process.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all the good work by you and all the team that you work with. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to the next thing on our agenda, which is, I don't think we have any requests for data. Is that correct, Scott?
Actually, we do, ma'am. We have that. Okay. But before, if we may, ma'am, before we go into the next agenda, my understanding is we did put the PMR of USIMS into the backups on agenda item number 1. Am I tracking that right, Cammie? Yes. Now we're not planning on briefing this. We just want to make sure that the finance committee members know that this is what we presented to the bill sponsors for USIMS, Senator Anderegg and Representative Lisenby, respectfully, and Senator Reeby. And the feedback we got was very positive. So I just want to make sure, that we recognize that, and that, because you had asked last month too, are you updating the legislature and the PMR, with PN? And we said yes. And that's all we're doing here. We're not going to go through it with you. It's here for your review. If you have any questions or concerns, any of the committee members do, you can email myself, Director Feld, or Chuma. So with that then, ma'am, I think that's the 2 items that we wanted to, cover for item number 1. And then, do you want to go ahead and progress to 2 now? Then,
I just want to
Sorry.
make sure if anyone has any questions on the Sims document on the PM. Okay, we're going on to number 2 for data requests.
Now, my understanding is in item number 2, we did follow up, and you already kind of covered this, is we needed to follow up with you. You made a request on the per pupil breakdown of that's in there, isn't it, as well in the backups? Yes, there we go. So we do have follow up for you in that. So subject to your review, and any questions or concerns, Paula, can you come back on and just walk the committee members through this at the chair's direction, if that's okay, ma'am?
Yeah, I would probably leave it to see if they have any questions on this rather than make Paula go through it.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Chair, do you have any? But I just notice the increase exponentially in the amount of money per student. Any questions by committee members on this? Paula, could you tell us one thing? Where was the biggest jump and when?
Probably the largest jump happened about 3 years ago when we did the constitutional amendment that changed from just distributing interest and dividends and moved to a percentage of the value of the fund. And since that was a larger portion of the fund, up to 4%, I think that was the year when we had the largest increase. Does that answer your question?
It answers my question. Sorry about the noise in the background.
And Chair, I don't have any questions on this, but could I just
Chair?
It's and it's not very often, and maybe it should be scheduled sometime for it again, especially with new board members coming on, that they really understand how this works, and it's just not automatic money that just pours into a bank account. There are a lot of people that work really, really hard to make this happen. And there's checks and balances in place, and sometime I think it will be good for us to revisit that publicly. I can't remember when the last time we had SITLA, SITFO come to a board meeting, but this just doesn't automatically print money and shell out. There's a tremendous amount of responsibility also attached with this, that it's spent correctly and that it grows. So shout outs to all of those that are participating in it. And I know, Paula, that you're in those circles often, and if you could express our appreciation and that we do recognize their efforts and yours and your staff in making this happen. So thank you.
Could I respond, Chair Belknap? Okay, just to let you, maybe as a reminder, the new office, the Lands Trust Protection and Advocacy Office, provides an annual report to the board, and that will happen in January. And they have put together we've done 2 things to try and help understand this process that you've talked about. One is a short 3-minute video that was just completed last week that talks about the different parts of the system. It's narrated by the state treasurer, who chairs the fund committee. And in addition, they have put together, the advocacy office has put together a brochure that kind of explains the land, the fund, their role, and the distribution to schools. And so we'll have that for you in the January meeting of the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paula. Okay, I guess we're ready to move to number 3. Are you ready for number 2, Scott?
Yeah, I think that was it. I think let me just double check with Cammie. Cammie, that was the only item or the only follow-up we had ready for item number 2, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. We're ready to move
Okay,
on.
we're going to move on to number 3, which is an action item, capstone revolving loan. Scott, I think you're doing that, yes?
Yes. So, basically, as we all know, just give a little background on this. Capstone closed at the end of last school year, and they had obviously they had received a loan proceeds from the charter school revolving loan. In accordance with our budgetary procedures, what we have essentially is what amounts to a debt instrument then. And because there is an outstanding balance, and we've experienced this with other charter school closures in the past, we need to follow a process by which we essentially account for that debt or ultimately take a process of writing off the debt. So, we provided the background to you, or additional background to you on, the program itself or the process itself for loans to charter schools. It is risky. In addition to, if we could go to it at this point, we'll show you the breakdown of the balance owed. I think that's in the backup. So yes, okay. Can you make it a little bit bigger? So this is the outstanding amount, and this is what we need to get board approval to do, or get. So, staff are recommending that the finance committee make a recommendation to the board, or, request that the board authorize us to dispense of this debt in accordance with all of the applicable state finance rules for, again, what amounts to a write-off of the debt. Other questions you may have or concerns is, yes, anytime that we do write off the debt, that's less money that's available potentially available to other charter schools out of this particular source of funding. It's a viable source of funding. It has helped in the past, and that's just part of the challenge or the process here when we get into closures, and we have to dispense of or properly account for the dollars and the debt instruments. With that, then, Chair Belknap, if it's okay, can you recognize Deborah to see if I missed anything? Deborah, did I any other details you think are important for the Finance Committee members to know regarding this particular action that we're requesting?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. And also, I just, I want to be able to recognize, I think Stuart is here from the SCSB. If he has any input to say, Stuart, did I miss anything? Through the chair, of course, ma'am, recognizing Stuart. Stuart, did I miss anything?
No, Scott, I think you covered it.
Okay. All right, so with that, ma'am, we respectfully request a motion by which, the Finance Committee makes whatever recommendation you feel is necessary to the board, along the lines of our having to, basically attend to the fact that this balance is outstanding and Capstone is effectively closed.
Okay, Chair Huntsman?
I'm slow on those, finding the mute side. A couple of questions that I have, Chair, and that is, again, and I should know this, but I have forgotten, what is the total amount of money that happens to be in this fund that these loans can come out of? And then what percentage of that money is being written off? So that's one. So what's the total amount that it is presently, or I could say, what did it start out being and what is it presently? Because in the past we've had discussions, and it's been really good for our board to refresh themselves in knowing that we are in the banking business, and a lot of us didn't know that when we ran on this. And so there are accounts, and we're stewardships over the account, and so there's a amount of money that's loaned, and there's some interest paid, and some people are fantastic in paying in, and then now and again we have bad debt or bad debtors, and then we have to write it off. But I think a little recap of that might be handy to have maybe in our backups if this moves out of committee, to have a little bit of that background. And then the other question I'd have is how many dollars since the loan, or since this these funds were put together, how many total dollars have we written off along, and this will most likely include this 169,901. So those are my questions. I'm curious. I know they're not really relevant, but
no, I think they are. So Stuart, I don't know if you're going to answer that or Scott.
Yeah, no, well, so yeah, I'll defer to Stuart. So my understanding is, it's around $2 million, but yeah, let's defer to Stuart as far as the account itself, and then Stuart can walk us through the process and try to answer those questions if possible. So Stuart.
Hi, I'm Stuart O'Connor, Compliance Manager with the State Charter School Board. It's my understanding that this revolving loan account started with about $2 million. Last that we checked, I think a few months ago, it was around $3 million that was in the fund. I don't have the exact figures, but it was close to $3 million. And as far as historical write-offs, and maybe Scott, you can help me out here, but I think one other school has had their revolving loan written off, but I think that's the only one we've written off in the past.
Yeah, so Chair, that's my understanding as well, and it was around $70,000+ that we wrote off. It was maybe the second year I was here. I can't remember the school though. I can't remember the school name, so I'd have to come back with the school name, Chair Huntsman. Maybe Deborah remembers the school name. Deborah, do you recall that school?
I'm waiting for a response back from Sue. I actually think there were 2 schools that we've had to write off in the past. So I'm getting those amounts and the names of the schools really quickly.
Well, these write-offs affect other charters from getting, but if the account has $3 million in it, how will that affect any interest rates or anything else if we are becoming bad debtors here or bad loaners here?
Well, so I can take a shot at that. And Stuart, you can correct me if I'm wrong. We set the interest rate. Well, I should say there's a committee that really sets the interest rate, and the committee consists, or the voting members are a representative from GOMB and an individual. Then that's Jacob Wright. He has been in the past. I believe he's still there. And then one other individual that I believe is appointed by the SCSB. Is that right, Stuart? Or identified from the SCSB. I can't remember who the individual is, but I think they're identified. And as part of the process, they're the ones that have the authority to set the interest rates. And it's typically 2%. I haven't, since I've been here, I haven't seen much of a deviation from 2% from any of the prior decision-making processes on that. Now, yes, it could affect that because we always are trying to balance the availability of funds. So whereas, if you look at the original loan amount from Capstone, which is $300,000, they roughly paid about half of it back, right? So, you can see that, a little less than half of it because the principal balance or the outstanding balance is that $169,901. So when they do pay that back and they pay at the interest rate, we try to set the interest rate so that the fund will stay solvent enough for us to be able to provide the resource to charter schools at the time that they would seek or normally seek these loans. So it's a balancing act. It's a process that we take seriously. But my understanding is it's a joint effort, with the 2 individuals I've named. Jennifer and I have talked about in the past, and then Stuart, and then our own Danny from within financial operations. They all collaborate on this process. And then Sue Mack, she's our tracker basically of all the outstanding loans that are out there. She helps us with that, or the reconciliations with them. So it's a really good process and a really good joint effort. So if we have multiple defaults on loans, I could see where it might come at a later time when we need to increase the interest rate, because we want to land somewhere between that 2 million and 3 million, because it's a really good resource to charter schools, especially after about the 3rd year of operations. It's a good resource for them to continue with their innovations and processes and progress. So unfortunately, we've had some defaults. I mean, so this is our third school in my tenure here. But your other question, Chair Huntsman, is we'd have to, and I'm not sure if we could get this to you today, but you asked, how many schools have loans outstanding out there. We can get those details to you, I'm sure, but I'm not sure I can get that to you today.
I'm only bringing this up because as this comes out of finance, so I think there'll be a lot of questions. So if we had some of this in our backups, it should minimize that in our open meeting. And then for us as committee members, because this doesn't come up very often, I think in the future it'd be just kind of nice to have that in the backup so can refresh everyone's memory that sometimes we are in the banking business and we're good to do it. And I remember all the good numbers from the past. Yes, it's growing, which is a good thing, but now and again you do have bad debt, and this where we're at right now is where there is a failure to pay back and time to write off. I'm good to make a motion, Chair, if you're ready. I just thought it would be good to have that in our backups. I don't need tons of detail.
Just before you do, Chair, is there anyone who has questions that might not be to the motion they'd like to ask now?
Nope.
Okay, Chair Huntsman.
Okay, I'd like to make the motion that the Finance Committee makes a recommendation to the Utah State Board of Education to direct the financial operations staff to follow the policies and procedures of state finance to effectively write off the remaining balance owed by the closed charter school Capstone Academy. I don't think I have to put a dollar amount because it seems like it bounces on the pennies here and there, but at the time you write it off. So.
Okay, are there any questions to that motion? Okay, the Finance Committee members make a recommendation to the Utah State Board of Education to direct the financial operations staff to follow the policies and procedures of state finance to effectively write off the remaining balance owed by the closed charter Capstone Academy. Any questions to that? Seeing none, all vote please. Sorry, can't do all in favor.
I was going to second, but you didn't ask me to.
You don't need to. Okay, voting's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Stuart, for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have to get back to my agenda. All right, so now we'll go on to number 4. It's an actionable item to report on the building renovations and request for additional funds. Scott, I think this is you again.
Yeah, it's me. But what I'd like to do is, as you know, Cami, she's our administrative services manager, and she provides she tracks basically all the renovations. One thing that I do want to, make sure, and I've said this before, is we did a really thorough cost-benefit analysis. What I mean by that is, what would be the cost of us, moving to another building, either leasing or buying, or, compared with all of the, refurbishment, if you will, or processes that we've been taking pretty much, I would say, over the last 2 to 3 years. And we're nearing the end. We're nearing the end of, all of the ADA compliance that we've had to meet. And, there's still some projects that, are joint efforts along the lines of safety with DFCM. But we're getting really close to the end here of all the refurbishments and updates. And how I know that is you can usually tell that, you're getting to the end with a building refurbishment when you're down to getting the carpet in, right? We're really at that closure point. We need a little bit more money. We have a staff member that we hire part-time, or that we did hire part-time. His name is Shane, and he's just outstanding. We just get a lot of feedback from across the building on just how awesome he is about helping people out, helping take cubicles down. He's a money saver in that sense. So we don't have to outsource to get a lot of the, quote unquote construction type work done. Always within compliance, compliance to building codes and things like that, of course. But Chair, if I may, let me turn it over to Cammie so she can walk you all through the budget, what we've accomplished, how much is left, and then, ultimately, request that the Finance Committee support our request for use of the board's discretionary funds. So can we recognize Cammie at this point, ma'am?
Yep. Go, Miss Cammie.
Good morning. So on this spreadsheet that I've attached, it's just to show you based on where we finished last year and what happened before the LFA took our funds last fiscal year. So we had those projects that I've identified in the orangish color that were obligated, but we hadn't entered a contract into or contract with yet. So we did have $100,000 for a break room remodel. We were looking at covered parking for the state fleet vehicles. The IT section wanted a wall that they could have all of their TVs and stuff on so that they could have an instant reference to what was going on with the systems. HR cubicles, and then we had a camera access control system that we were doing. DFCM covered most of that. We do have a few dollars that we need to come up with to help with the Berg system that accidentally got removed when they came to remove the old system. But as you can see, we had swept from the LFA the $293,650.92 because of those things were not entered into a contract at the time when it got swept. Of that amount, I highlighted in blue what has since been covered with capital improvement dollars from DFCM. So they're actually covering almost $79,000 of those projects. Scott touched on the facility assistant that we have, Shane Johnson, and he really is fantastic. If you think about little things like moving whiteboards or taking surplus property down or those heavy moves that, are hard for staff to do. He comes in twice a week. He's just, we need to keep him. So far this year, I don't have any funds in my facility budget. If I needed to pull electrical for an outlet or something like that, I just don't have any funds in the budget this year because it was all swept. So I'm requesting some funding, I guess.
Chair, if I may.
Scott, are you going to show that? You're going to show that?
Yes. So there should be the discretionary funds report, which the entire board gets updated on every month. You put that in there, didn't you, Cammie?
Yes, that's also in there.
Yeah. Can we go to that report, Jeff? I think you're still driving. Should be in the backups. No?
I'm not seeing an additional report in the backup. I only have the spreadsheet I have listed.
Yeah, can you jump into CivClerk? Can you show us the CivClerk?
Yeah, hold on just a moment.
Sorry, yeah, we added it probably after the packet was created.
I'm looking at CivClerk right now, so.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, attachment, yes, sir. There we go. Awesome. So Chair Belknap, as you know, the board receives this perpetually. This being the discretionary funds report as an update. What we're requesting is that the Finance Committee make a motion to have ask the board to authorize our use of the remaining state funds balance, upper right-hand corner, the quadrant up there. That remaining amount is what, $22,715.35. We'd like that to go to, to the budget, to the building budget. We'd also we're also requesting the general funds as well, the 22.5. So the total between, it's in the, I totaled them and put it into the motion that we're recommending, the recommendation that we're making. So we have the total of those, but the motion could be that, to allow staff to use the remaining balances of state funds and general funds in the board's discretionary account for the purposes of completing building refurbishments and modifications. That's what we're requesting. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense. Does anyone have any questions on that? Scott, I actually do have a question as to the FMLA money, FML money, federal mineral lease money. Could that be used for that, or can it not?
Well, ma'am, yesterday the board approved the remaining balance to go towards the director of equity, position. Right. So that 234, 151, 55 is, designated now for that.
Okay. So what about the 17? I'm just trying to think, which is the most restricted money here?
Land exchange, and Deborah can jump in here too. We've really had a hard time trying to interpret what we could really use land exchange money for. I mean, the state funds and general funds for the purpose of building refurbishment and modification is fine. That's an acceptable use. That doesn't have the the restrictions. FML is research and development. That's why it fits so well with what the board processed yesterday, if you will. But Deborah, what's the land exchange? The wording of that kind of escapes me right now. Do you remember that? It just seems really restrictive.
Yeah, it's more the use of educational research and experimentation by using staff and facilities to improve the quality of education in Utah, something like that.
Okay, so it has to be the state in general. It can't be the land exchange. Okay.
Right. It can't benefit just one particular entity. We'd have to be able to really justify that 17,000 where it's benefiting the public education system as a whole.
Right. Okay, I got that. Okay, any questions on that committee? And is that, I have one more, sorry. The state and general funds, is it already earmarked for things, or is that, it's not that big of an amount of money. Is it there for when things come up over the next year?
No, it is currently unencumbered right now. Deborah can correct me if I'm wrong, but that remaining balance of state funds and general funds is not encumbered for anything right now. And we do want to, we're respectfully requesting that the Finance Committee ask the board to allow us to encumber and use it for the remainder of our projects related to the building modification and updates. So,
okay, right? So we do need it to finish our project.
Yes, ma'am. We needed to. We also needed to keep that part-time employee on. That Shane. So it'll go both for materials and supplies, but then also, to fund him through the rest of the time that we need him there too.
All right. Thank you, Chair Huntsman.
I'm trying to find within a recommended motion the exact dollars that specifically.
I thought I put.
Can you pull that up, Jeff? The motion.
Yeah, can you go back? Well, go to Civ Clerk. You're in Civ Clerk. Go to the agenda item itself, and I really believe I totaled it. So if you click on recommendation, let's see.
No, all I could see is a general thing. I couldn't see any specificity. I'm going to learn to say that word one of these times. So.
Specificity, right? God, I really thought I had totaled that somewhere.
I'm not finding it.
I just totaled it.
He's totaled it in the.
Oh.
What's the total?
$46,215.35. $46,215.35. So I think Chair Huntsman wants to make a motion.
So moved.
Okay, so now let me.
I can't split my screen because I want to be specific. To
Okay, so
how many
I'll
where-
reread the motion.
I thought
I'll
I put
reread
it.
it. Okay, the Finance Committee recommends that the Utah State Board of Education use the identified funds from the identified source in support of the final project for building renovations and reimbursements of $46,215.35.
So much, yeah, that's it. So moved.
Any questions by committee? It can stay there, Jeff.
Nope.
No questions? Okay. All right. Please vote. Thank you. Voting's unanimous, and thank you. I think this will really help them to finish up the project. So thank you so much. Thank you, Cammie, for doing this project.
Thank you.
It's big. Okay, gotta slide my screen again. Okay, we are on item number, I just have to go back. We are on item number 5, and it's the board bylaws, and Jeff Van Holten will be helping us. However, just note, we might not get through all of this today. I want to make sure that we get this right, and we need to think about how this affects the board as a whole, and so let's just work it. Let's work the mind here, okay? So Jeff, I think you're on.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited that I am what stands between you and lunch at some point if you're not off camera eating anyway. I'm going to quickly go through some of these edits, and I'm just going to quickly send a text message to Brittany Cummins, Vice Chair Cummins. She worked with myself and Lorraine Austin on drafting these, and I know that she wanted to be here for this as well. While we're waiting for her, though, I want to kind of highlight some of the changes. You'll notice right away in the table of contents, there's going to be some sections that we move around for the sake of clarity and making it a little bit easier. In particular, the sections about the direct employees of the board versus some of the other sections. That's really one we wanted to split out. And we also wanted to kind of move the board committee section up next to other sections that made more sense. So there is some cutting and pasting here that makes it feel like we've done some dramatic things in that regard, but hopefully most of those sections are not dramatically altered. They're just being moved. There are some substantive changes here that I want to make sure we cover and that you're aware of. First, we really wanted to get clear on what is a conflict of interest and to really build out from the ethics section of the bylaws what it is and what it is not. It's always important to make sure that we're very clear on what it is that would constitute a conflict of interest and how you handle declaring your conflict of interest and what is required of you as a board member if you have one. So you'll see that we've added a more beefed up definition that brings in the part of Utah code that applies to you as elected officials to begin with. We'll keep moving. I noticed Lorraine has her hand up. Maybe I should pause, Lorraine, if you want to jump in and join me.
Okay, this is Lorraine Austin, Secretary to the Board. I just wanted to also comment that in going through this, AAG Michelle Buse also reviewed all the bylaws and is particularly with the ethics portions. So I just wanted to let you know that she has, we have had the legal review as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Lorraine.
So Miss Lorraine, you're telling us we just didn't make it up.
Well, maybe some of it.
What was that comment? This is Board Member Nelson. What'd you say?
What did I say? I just said, so we're just not making it up.
Oh, yeah. Never mind. Gotcha. I misheard.
Thanks.
So if there are any specific questions about conflict of interest and what we've added, Michelle Buse, I believe, is on here as well. And I am certain would be ready and willing to answer any of those questions and why some of those edits were made.
Okay. Can we go? Do you want to do that whole section, or do you want to just do each place where you've made a change? I just want to make sure we have that the board members have opportunity to make comments?
Whatever you would prefer, Chair, if you find we want
Can we go back up to that? I don't know why we are off of it. What happened? Okay. So finish I, and then let's see if anyone has questions on definitions. So let's do each section and ask questions.
So you'll see the definition change there for conflict of interest, and then you'll also see down on I, the definition for board standing committee means the 3 standing committees that exist. We wanted to make sure it was clear that the audit committee is not considered a standing committee because they operate a little bit differently than the standing committees do. So those are the definitions and their updates. I can pause here if there are any questions.
Any question, board members? Okay, good. The definitions are clear then. That conflict of interest is about as clear as mud, but I know exactly where it came from. So, okay, let's go on to the next section.
I believe Chair Huntsman has his hand up.
Yes, I do. May I speak, Chair? Let's see, I'm not muted, video's on, my hand is now brought down. I think one thing that might be handy as we're going through this, and especially with when as this goes before the board, I think I wish there was a way that we can inventory notes of why these proposed changes are there, right? Like the last explanation that Jeff just made on the board standing committee. That note, if there was a note in there, would probably resolve a lot of challenges that some of our board members may have with any of these proposed changes. Of course, all of this work is kind of accumulation of inventorying challenges that we might have had with our bylaws, and of course we're housekeeping, updating, and etc. But I'm wondering, Chair Belknap, if there's a way to have a little note of explanation of why and whose fingerprints are on it, like AAG Buse inserted this. I think it would help strengthen the dialogue that we have in the future and put some extra merit and justification in the proposed changes. Is that something that you would want to do, Chair, or see?
Well, I like that idea, especially as we get going here. There's some that are dramatic, big changes and so maybe as to why, where we have over here in the right under the comment section, where it could be who made the comment and maybe why the change or where it came from. The conflict of interest is probably pretty clear that it came from statute and we needed to beef up a little bit, but it might be nice to, I actually appreciate that, more clarity. So Jeff, do you have any qualms with that?
No. My question would be, do you want me to be doing that currently in this meeting as we go along and adding those in, or would you prefer that what's verbally addressed in this meeting today be added before the full board meeting?
Well, I think it might be really slow to do that in this meeting, especially where you're driving and functioning. So if you're okay with that, to come back and do that.
That would be my preference, yes. I'll make sure I will commit to that.
Jeff, this is Lorraine, and I will help as well take notes on that.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thanks, Miss Lorraine. Okay, Jeff. Thanks, Jeff.
We'll jump down here into the membership section. Not a whole lot changed here. The reason why this deletion is here is it gets moved into the section regarding the board employees. Plus, it is already a statutory requirement. Which is a question we'll raise later, but I'll put it out there for all of you to consider now. There are several parts of the bylaws that are essentially just a list of what is in code. And the question we have for all of you to consider is, do you want that list? Because those lists are currently not necessarily comprehensive and have everything in code listed. Or is the fact that it is already in code sufficient and you do not need to have it restated in the bylaws? Something to put in the back of your mind as we go through this. The next section is the board member ethics section. Again, we add in the code citation here under B, and then we have built out a little more clarity around conflicts of interest and how to handle those. And if Chair, if I may, I might defer to Michelle Buse regarding any of these edits. And also the question that we do have currently under B is, do we want to include a possible statement about board members with conflicts not making motions? And if so, I would be able to provide some verbiage for that. Michelle, is there anything you wanted to add regarding this section under A of why we made any of these edits?
Well, we just tried to clarify and take exactly what definitions there were in statute and add a little more clarity after there was some controversy with board members and some conflict and accusations that went around. And we thought, if there was anything that we could take out of the statute to alleviate that and help board members in their relationships with one another and their relationships in having outside employment, because, it is just the way that education is. It's very common for people who are leaders in education to also have employment in education. It's a unique field. It's a unique area. And it's like saying, just because I went to a doctor doesn't mean that I know how to do surgery on everybody. Just because I went to school doesn't mean I have the expertise of knowing how to run a school or having that real in-depth background knowledge of knowing how to operate everything. And so we really rely on a small number of people sometimes carry a really high burden, and oftentimes they wear many hats. And we have some board members that wear many hats, that have jobs in the education system and still have time and have sacrificed time to run for office and service as board members. And so we wanted to just clarify by taking as much as we possibly could out of different statutes in the procurement parts that had ethics and the government officials parts that had ethics, to just try and help everyone understand that we aren't just one person. We have different facets of ourselves, and we can be these different people and still be ethical and serve the different parts of ourselves in ways that are still upstanding, and kind of put that all out there. So that was my intent. I don't know if that's how you read it, but that was the intent of making those changes, was to try and outline that so everyone could accept that and feel more comfortable and recognize those different talents that people were bringing to the table, and not feel like anyone was playing favorites or having favoritism shown while they had those different parts of themselves. I hope that wasn't confusing.
No, but I have a couple of questions on this one. One, if there was a conflict of interest in a committee, would the committee chair be responsible to do AI or II in there?
I need to pull it up on my other computer because I can't read.
Well, it actually is to acknowledge and disclose the conflict of interest. The committee, it would be disclosed in the beginning, but
the chair would have the responsibility to make the ultimate decision of whether or not the individual would be able to remain. In the practice that I've seen you as board members, the way that you have implemented it is that you have generally deferred to the individual. The leader has had the conversation with the individual and said, do you think, for example, Board Member Belknap, that based on your relationship with that you can still be a part of this decision and not allow your relationship in that to impact that. And generally, the leader has deferred to the board member's decision. I understand that that won't always happen, and we would defer to the chair's ability if there was some strong feeling that that was not the case. We have most frequently had the board members be overly cautious and coming to Brian and myself and saying, since this has happened a couple of years ago where there were allegations of board members having conflict of interests, not being honored and not stepping back, I can say that we've had more board members come to us with issues that really didn't bring a conflict of interest, but they wanted to check with us just to make sure. And we've more frequently said, you should declare it, but we don't really see it being a conflict of interest, but just to help yourself feel better.
Right.
So we have
can
board members being overly cautious now in declaring their conflicts of interest after there was some conflict a couple of years ago. So I really have found board members being just so worried and so almost just worried to, maintain that outside job that they have or role that they have. And I want to assure them that there is the ability to be able to have those dual responsibilities and still be able to serve the public as a board member. So,
okay, I have another question, and maybe not for you, Michelle, it might be, but B, are we overstepping here if we don't allow a board member to make a motion, even though they don't vote on it? Or is this common practice in other settings that are similar to ours?
If they have a conflict of interest, they're not allowed to be a participant in the discussion at all. So if they have declared that they have a conflict of interest, they're allowed to remain in the meeting. This is just what I found when I checked with other bodies. Because it is a public meeting, they're not required to leave the meeting.
But they're not even allowed to discuss. Is that, Mark, go ahead, Mark. Let me think about this one for a minute.
They're allowed to remain in the meeting unless it's something to do with an executive session. And we're talking strategy, and there's a conflict, and then they're asked to leave the meeting. Is that correct, AAG Buse?
May I speak, Chair?
Yeah,
yes, I would agree with that. I was speaking in context of a committee meeting, so that if we're in a general committee meeting and an individual or a general board meeting where it was an open meeting and a board member declared a conflict, what the general practice is in looking at other bodies is that individual is no longer allowed to participate in the discussion, which would prevent them from making a motion as well. But they are allowed to be present and to listen to the discussion in the same manner that any member of the public would be allowed to.
And so a lot of the discovery comes from potential conflicts with the disclosure piece. And then also as things are being posted on the agenda, members, board members will have a discussion or will let the chair know that on this particular interest, I have a conflict or I may have a conflict. And then there's also procedures in place how to address conflict to see whether or not they continue to participate. Are you going to go to that space?
Certainly in a committee meeting where it's common for the chair to allow the public to make a comment, a board member would be appropriate to allow a board member that had a conflict of interest to make a comment in the context of a member of the public. Because if you're allowing a member of the public to make a comment, it would be inappropriate to quash the board member's right to be able to make a statement from the perspective as a member of the public. But to be able to sit at the table and as a member of the committee, to be participating in the discussion as a member of the committee, once they've declared that conflict of interest, when I looked at other bodies, that was not allowed once the conflict of interest was declared.
Michelle Bolter, Michelle Bolter.
Thanks. So I guess that leads me to the question with AII, that because you're saying once the conflict of interest is declared, then they no longer participate in that discussion or make motions or what have you, but they can participate if it's a public meeting as a member of the public. But with AII, it says that the chair would have the ability to waive the conflict of interest and allow the member to fully participate. So help me understand that.
That's happened frequently when the individual declared that they had a conflict of interest and the chair had the discussion publicly and said, do you feel that that conflict of interest will impact your ability to make an objective decision? And the individual said, no, I don't think that it will, but I wanted you to know that, for example, I work in the Washington School District, but I don't have any relationship with this department that's going to receive this funding, or I don't have any interrelationship with this individual that you're choosing or electing to serve on this committee or board. So they might say, I have that potential conflict because I work in this area, but I feel that it would not influence my decision. Then the decision is the chair's to be able to determine whether or not that individual gets to continue to participate. So if they feel that there isn't going to be any impact on the decision, that's the time when that individual would be able to fully participate. When they wouldn't be able to fully participate is at a time when the decision was made that they would need to recuse themselves because it would be impactful on their decision. So I'm sorry if I didn't explain that very clearly, Board Member Bolter. I can see definitely where my explanation seemed in conflict with that.
Okay, yeah, no, now I understand it and that makes sense because we have done that before. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. I can see where my explanation was confusing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments on B? And is it clear enough that they can't make motions, or should they not be involved in the discussion? Board members, what are your thoughts there?
Well, after the explanation that was given by our AAG Buse, I don't know that we need a B because AII would take care of that, would it not? If they waive it, then they could go ahead and make a motion. But if it's not waived, then they wouldn't even be able to participate.
So I was going to say Michelle B. That doesn't help. So Michelle Buse.
I could work on making that language a little clearer because I do see the conflict or the confusion in that language after what Board Member Bolter asked, and the way that she asked that, brings to light. Of course, when you write something, you think you've written it very clearly, and then when someone points out to you the way it can be interpreted differently, you think, oh, I do need to write that more clearly. And I would be willing, if you would allow me to, and I could then email it to you, look at if I could maybe rewrite that so that it was more clear that if there was no seen conflict of interest, or that conflict of interest was waived by the board chair, that the individual could fully participate. But if the individual recused themselves, then they would need to participate only at a capacity as a member of the public.
Okay, and that's okay, because I don't think we're going to get through all of this today.
Okay,
Michelle, so if you would take that.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jeff, you can see why this is going to take us a long time. So go ahead.
Not a problem at all. I go to the Standards and Assessment Committee on a regular basis. I'm used to this. And you can tell them all I said that. So if we're comfortable, I will move on from the conflicts of interest section. Yes? Okay. Moving down to the next set of edits. Kind of see this is still the conflicts and ethics section. We moved a couple of things up from the duties and responsibilities section here. So that's not new necessarily, it's just in a new place. And there is this deletion here that the board shall act as the ethics committee to receive and investigate complaints and take appropriate action. The original thinking behind this deletion was there would not be a need for the board to be the ethics committee because there is already a process with your AAGs to handle these kinds of complaints. And it's likely more appropriate for somebody not on the board, such as your AAGs, to handle this rather than bring it out to the full board to deal with. So that's why that deletion is there. And then we get into the duties and responsibilities. Again, this is really just a list of what is already in code. And so the question remains, is this needed here? There was a discussion that was had regarding this in terms of what are bylaws and are bylaws restatements of something else? Or are they clarity provided for the procedures and operations that are not outlined somewhere else? And in that discussion, there was definitely more of a preference for the latter, that the bylaws don't necessarily need to restate a whole list of statute, because the bylaws should be really more about your process and your procedures that statute may not be as detailed about. But if you would prefer to keep this in, we will need to make edits to this list because it is not complete. And this list will be updated every legislative session as things get changed and amended by different bills. So I will again posit the question for you all about whether or not you feel that a list of your statutory duties is relevant and pertinent for the bylaws, or whether or not you would prefer that this section be removed because the requirements exist regardless.
Board members?
I don't know. I like having the list. Sorry, board.
Go ahead. So
I like having the list, but then I can see how it can be cumbersome too. So I guess I'm not feeling strongly one way or the other.
Okay, Scott?
I don't know. I don't have strong opinions one way or the other. I see what's going on. I just still processing, if you will.
Okay, thank you. One of the thoughts I had is if we kept this duties and responsibility, you keep the section and you just put the constitutional requirement only, and can we put a hyperlink there for it?
Yes, we could definitely hyperlink actually all of these codes that are cited if you'd prefer.
Well, and then it would be, and then we could find the list of our duties, correct, under the code.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, committee, what do you think about that idea?
I really like that idea. You know,
yeah, I'm open to that. I agree, Sean.
Yeah, I like it. When you look at duties and responsibilities and bylaws, as stated before, the bylaws are in addition to and specific for the specific committee members outside of the standard policies. So I think a hyperlink would be really effective.
Thank you. Chair Huntsman?
Point of reference.
I'm good.
So are you okay with that doing that, Jeff? And especially in this section making them hyperlinks, but I'm not sure it wouldn't be fabulous if all of the, wherever we have statute written in here, that it hyperlinks to what we need to see.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say. If we could hyperlink all like statutes, because it would be nice.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Just to be clear, are you saying hyperlink instead of having this cut and paste language? So just hyperlink like the reference? Okay.
Yes. And Jeff, just for clarity, and if you hyperlink, are there? I can see that there are different ones here. There's 3 different ones listed here, or I think 4 already. And so instead of listing all the duties, could we have 3 different hyperlinks that have a title? Adopting administrative rules, hyperlink it. Establishing standards. Is that how it would be, or would it all be just under one statute?
It would be the former. So it would be kind of, because each of these, although they're, like, for example, 2 and 3 are both found in 53E-3. The one's in 401, the other one's in part 501. So we would need to hyperlink to each one because we'd be hyperlinking to the legislative website, and each of these would actually be its own web page on the legislative website.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Then we wouldn't have to have the list. So
great. We have this addition here, which is really more of a clarity of what we meant already and what was in this section. Not really a dramatic change there, more of a rewording, if you will. We'll just keep going. And you'll see here, as we jump down, the next section we're looking at where there's major edits is under your duties and responsibilities, managing the board's staff and USDB. And we have moved some of this section down into your direct employees section because it just made more sense to have some of this spelled out more directly in that section than here.
Members, if you ever want to stop, just come in. You know how we have to do that in this setting. So.
And again, you'll notice this deletion here is not getting rid of, but this was moved up. We actually have already come across this earlier on. So now we are in section 6 of your bylaws, page 8 of 33. We're making it. This is the board officers section. And again, there's not a whole lot here that we changed. We moved a couple of these sections. And we wanted to make sure, just keep in mind that you already have a board policy that talks all about the election of your officers as a board. So there was a conversation about how much of this needs to be in the bylaws because you already have a board policy that says a lot of the same things, and you actually just amended those policies yesterday to address electronic voting. So there is a question about really how much of this section even needs to exist because you already have a policy about it. So we did delete some things that we felt were definitely in the policy already, and there's no reason to restate it. But it is definitely up to you whether or not you would want this full section just moved over to the board policy so it's all in one place rather than a piece here and a piece there. But we can also keep some of these pieces here as well if you prefer that.
Board members, what are your thoughts here? I was thinking, why wouldn't we put this into policy? Because it only deals with us.
So I have a question. Would it be moved over to the voting part of the board policy? Is that what it would be?
Yes, and there's other parts here as well as you read. There's also the duties of the board chair and the vice chair as well, and some of the responsibilities that they would have. And so you could move those and create a new section in the board policy as well, stating the specific responsibilities of the elected officers. Or you could keep it here as well. Or you could do a hybrid. A hybrid would be you move the details to the policy, but then you cite the policy here. So it would say something like the duties of the board chair can be found in Board Policy 1002.
I'm trying to figure out the election process, if it needs to be here or just in policy, because the process just deals with us, correct?
Correct.
So does that even need to be in policy, or just leave it here and remove it out of policy and put it here? I don't know. I might be complicating things more, but I think it needs to be in one place or the other. But I don't know. Somebody else talk.
You were speaking through the issues we had as well. Lorraine has her hand up and can kind of.
Yeah, she just raised it. Miss Lorraine.
Okay, Board Policy 2002 just deals with the elections and what goes on in the elections, the process of elections. So some of these things wouldn't be in there, like the duties of the chair and vice chair don't have anything to do with the elections themselves. So it makes sense that in bylaws. The things in bylaws are generally things that aren't changed very much. You want your bylaws to be pretty set. Maybe change those once a year. Where policy is more fluid and you can change that a little bit more. That's sort of the intent of bylaws, is that they're pretty set.
So, Miss Lorraine, you're thinking, just from what you said, not that you're making a decision here, but the election pieces that might change could be in the bylaws. In the policies and the bylaws here, we could reference 2002.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. For instance, you made a change yesterday in your policy. You wouldn't want to have to go to your bylaws to make that change. Yeah,
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that.
But I do think a new one that's pretty important is item number 3, that the newly elected chair and vice chair will assume responsibilities immediately. This is new, immediately following the conclusion of the meeting in which they're elected. I put that in because there has been confusion always about, well, when do they take over? So this was just my suggestion, but you can change that as well. But I think that might be important to have in the bylaws.
So, Ms. Lorraine, just for clarity here and maybe some collision that could happen, if a newly elected board member becomes a chair or vice chair, but they haven't been sworn in till January, what would we do there?
Well, there's nothing that they do that's voted on by the board. For instance, they organize committees. They could still do that work because they won't be taking official action where they would need to vote, I would think. I guess I would have to defer to the AAGs on that. That's something I hadn't thought of, that you may have a new board member. But you have to have people in place to organize committees. If you wait
till
January, the board just really has a hard time moving forward. So,
okay, good point. Mark, and then Michelle.
The other challenge is you can assume this. Let's just say you have the elections the first week of December, or the following week after the December board meeting, and then all of a sudden there's an emergency or something needs to happen, and you have to call a meeting. We've had a few firsts that happened over the last year, and so who is going to do that when you're not, and especially as Laura said, if you're newly elected and you're not assuming, and your term starts January 1, how do you get into that space of assuming those responsibilities? And that time between elections in December and the first part of January, there's got to be somebody there to make that happen. I can recognize why number 4 seems to be relevant, but I can also see that it creates a void in if there happens to be an emergency. I don't know if our AAGs can weigh in, but I was under the impression that when I was elected that my term starts January 1, and I am a board member until it ends the last day of December.
That was essentially my question as well. And I know that they have to make committee assignments, but we normally get our committee assignments. Like we could just say the start of committee new assignments begins February. That would allow that void to be filled, like Mark was talking about and what I was thinking about.
Unless your chair, sorry, I'm interrupting, unless your chair is no longer on the board.
Right, and then you're without them again. And committees were collected.
So.
Well, the responsibilities of the new elected chair and vice chair would start January 1st. Effectively, then that would end the old chair and vice chairs stuff. And then starting January 1st, they would then form new committees to begin in February, but everybody would remain in their committees in January.
But they can't, Shell, because January 1 it changes, and so
that's right. People that got off.
Yeah. So okay, Lorraine, you still have your hand up?
Yes. I just wanted to say we actually did try that one year where we didn't organize till February, and so we did not have committees in January, and it really put the board back.
Oh yes.
It just wasn't a good way to do it, especially where you're into the legislative session. I felt like it really wasn't a good thing. Could you give a provision for the newly elected chair and vice chair to organize committees, be able to do that responsibility before they take over in January?
I would go to our AAGs on that one, because if they can organize committees, that would be great rather than take on full responsibilities.
I think, can I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't think that there's anything that prevents you from giving them that authority as a transition action. If we called that a transition action, if they were elected as they've received their election by the public, and then as the board members who will be serving with them have elected them as leadership, could we put that in there that it is an action as a transition to the new board? I realize that technically they haven't been sworn in, and when the new board comes in January 1st, I guess if something happened and the board took an action and took them out of their leadership position, they could theoretically put, for some reason, different leadership in if something tragic happened or something terrible happened and there was an issue that they needed to change that. But that could happen any month of the year.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we could see it as a transition action once leadership had been selected.
So could we work on verbiage and maybe the legality of such a thing on that section there?
Yes, because I'm just coming up with it off the top.
I knew that. So, Michelle and Mark, you both have your hands up. I don't know if you still wanted to speak.
I was just wondering, just a question for AAG Views. If it could possibly say the newly elected chair and vice chair will assume transitioning responsibilities immediately following the conclusion of the meeting, and then assume their full position January 1st. I don't know if that's some idea for language.
I like that, Board Member Bolter. I'm writing that down. Thank you.
Chair Huntsman? Scott, do you have a question? Scott Nelson?
Sorry, I was talking and I was mute. Can I still speak?
No, we have so.
No, I don't have questions.
Okay, right. Thanks, Scott. No, just kidding, Mark. Go ahead.
So the other challenge is that same leadership are the ones that have called a meeting, who will not be chairing said meeting. If they're finishing in December, they'll have called the January meeting, and also will have put the agenda together. And so it's just not limited to some committee challenges. So the language that Board Member Bolter and AAG Buser have been talking about here might reference, not just limit it to the committee part of it, but also the an actual board meeting. It's never really been challenged, but it was a workaround or it was a cooperative transition when I found myself in that position, and we went through it and survived. But
you also weren't a new member, I
was not a new member. That's true.
Right, and I don't know the last time I've ever seen a brand new member be elected, but it can happen. So I like maybe assume transitioning responsibilities, and so that we know that's all about transitioning. I don't know, but I think we really need to look at that. But maybe we're going to be too late if we wait and do it next month on that.
Could we pass some of this sections like this one or something?
I think we can. Brian, do you have something you want to say? You're muted.
Okay, there we go. I'm looking at the statute regarding state board members and 53E-3-201. It says the duties of these officers, so these elected officers, so the chair, vice chair, shall be determined by the state board. To me, that means we're the masters of our own ship here. We can determine, we meaning the board, not me, but the board can just determine what duties that it wants its leadership to have and when. So we decide, is what I'm saying, however we want to.
Well, then I assume that we could say we'll assume responsibilities immediately. Mm-hmm. And just leave it at that, because it could be that. Miss Lorraine, you're raising your hand again. Lorraine?
Sorry, I realize I'm not muted. I think you'd have to look at though the board chair calling meetings. So someone that's not technically on the board yet, could they call a meeting of the board? And so that's something I think that's really important that I hadn't thought of. I think a lot of those things that are internal, like the committees or even making an agenda for next time there's a transition there. But I think that's really important, that calling of the board, because that's in statute that the chair calls meetings of the board. So that's going to be, I think it's important to say when that term ends. And we have had chairs that have turned to the person that got elected and said, as soon as that meeting was over, you're in charge now. But normally it is somebody who's already on the board. I will also say we have had elected that were not on the board yet. It's been years, but we have had that happen.
What about working together, that the outgoing and the incoming work together?
That would be covered with the word transitioning responsibilities, wouldn't it? I mean, they'd have to work together to transition, kind of like how Cox and Herbert are doing it for governor.
Would assume transitioning responsibilities.
I don't know.
Brian, you still have your mic, so do you have something? No? Brian?
No, I agree. I think I don't have any heartburn over that proposal.
Michelle, what do you think? The newly elected chair and vice chair will assume transitioning responsibilities.
I have to say that I assumed the same thing that board member Bolter did, that they would be working together with the chair that was leaving. But I do have to recognize that they may not have the same intentions and goals for the board for the upcoming year. So you may have a different a chair with some different ideas as to who should serve on committees and might want to come in and mix things up. So I think maybe that it needs to clarify that a little bit. And yeah, I think it might be a good idea to say that the new individual, as part of their transitioning responsibilities, would be to assign the new committee members, would be to prepare the agenda for the January board meeting, would be to set the date for the January board meeting.
Well, those are already set, so that's good.
So they don't really need to call the board meeting, right? So Lorraine was worried about them calling the board meeting, but that's already been done, right?
Right. I think it would be more if there was an emergency board meeting. But
so that would have to still be the old board chair.
Right. But an emergency one, I mean, it could happen after January 1st.
And they wouldn't have been sworn in yet, correct?
Yeah, I didn't mean to throw a wrench here. But
no, we have to think these things.
Good job, Laura.
Lorraine, go ahead.
You can swear the board members in any time. I mean, you can swear them in January 1st. So if you really had to have an emergency meeting before the 5th of January, which is usually your first meeting, you can swear those board members in. It doesn't even have to be in a board meeting. So just keep that in mind.
I can swear at them now. Oh, I mean, we could swear them in as soon as possible. Okay, so what could be our verbiage here, or do we need to be very clear as to what their duties would be? I don't know what they can't do. I don't know what they can't do other than call a meeting.
It appears the only thing statutorily that they can't do would be to call a meeting that wasn't already on the agenda, so an emergency meeting. The other would be okay for them to be the ones that assigned the committee members, so that you would be prepared for them to have an executive committee meeting and plan with your committee chairs what the agenda would be for your committee meetings and what the agenda would be for your upcoming board meeting. Those are important items that you need to be able to facilitate before the January meeting comes, so that staff can be ready to work with you as board members.
Okay, Lorraine, you still have your hand up. Did you have something else to add here with Michelle?
I did, and I'm trying to think of what it was. It was something else. Oh, the chair also acts as spokesperson for the board. So within that, there's a little bit of a 2-week period. If something happened and the chair needed to make a statement for the board, that's what I'm saying. You need some clear delineation on who is still in charge until January. For the board itself. Remember, if you have a new member, they're not a member of the board yet. It would be hard for them to be a spokesman for a board in which they're not a member of yet. So there are just some of those things that we need to think about, keeping a chair in maybe until December 31st when they go off the board, but allowing the new people coming in to have certain internal responsibilities.
So maybe we need to list those instead of the newly elected chair and vice chair will assume these transitioning responsibilities immediately after the conclusion of the meeting of their election, and then list A, this, B, this. And so what is it that we would need them to do? We need them to assign committees. Oh, somebody's working on it. Jeff's working on it already. Okay, Jeff, let's see what you've got.
This is just a rough stab based on the conversation, but I could also make a list instead.
Transition responsibilities.
I think we do need a list. That way we know what's clear, that they'll set the agenda for January. They'll set new committees.
Yeah, let's do the opposite, Jeff. Like Michelle's saying, let's do the opposite of telling them what they can't do, telling them what they will do. Assume transition responsibilities or the following transition responsibilities, including whatever. Yeah, good. Including.
And that everything else remains with the board chair.
Yep, who was before until January 1st. Lorraine, what else would they need to do? Set agenda? Would they set the agenda, Lorraine, or would they help set the agenda?
You know, in the past, we haven't had committee chairs as part of the executive committee, so it's really been leadership. That sometimes is in transition, sometimes not. Usually the new chair and vice chair, I think, have been there to set the agenda. But that has to happen so quickly. That really has to happen the week after.
So maybe really their only assignment is to help create the new committee assignments.
I think what happened last time, if Chair Huntsman correct me, I think when you were transitioned from Chair Crandall, that he had you in the meeting, that executive committee meeting where the agenda was set, and I think you actually conducted, but he was there to support. That's just trying to remember.
I thought he conducted, and I was there.
Learning.
Well, support of, because I officially, he wasn't officially released until the end of the month. But I had knowledge of what was on the agenda, and I also had an opportunity for input. So I respected his duties and responsibilities clear until the end of the month.
Well, and at that point, you don't have committee chairs generally set by then. They're just not, there's just not enough time with the way we have to do things to set the agenda with new committee chairs.
No. So really, what is their assignment? Only if they're elected and they're brand new is really only the issue.
Well, what you end up doing is if you don't restructure your committees by
before Christmas.
Yeah, well, or by the committee date in January, you may have committees that will not have a quorum.
Or they're not prepared.
Oh, not even close. But I'm just saying that's one of the risks. And the other option is don't have a January committee meeting. Or you have you have one in January, but not the first week of January. I mean, those are the only other options that we have.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
That it's always worked that the new vice chair and chair make committee assignments. They usually make them pretty quickly, but just not in time for the committee chairs to participate in setting the agenda. So the assignments are made because that first meeting in January is usually in conjunction with the USBA convention. So you really don't want to hold that later than that. So I would suggest maybe new committee assignments and then somewhat of a participate in setting the agenda for the January board meeting. So they would do that in conjunction with the current chair and vice chair and the current executive committee, really the current board executive committee.
Oh, that's good, Lorraine. Thank you. Are there any other things that they should be doing? Okay, how do we feel about this, everyone? Are you feeling better now?
Yes.
Good, Scott, thank you. Anything else? Sean, you felt
a lot more clear.
Okay, all right. Sean?
Yeah, I think we're good on this.
Okay, so I think that we should move this one out. I think this section, have we covered the whole section yet? I don't think we finished the whole section yet, Jeff.
We've covered the biggest pieces, absolutely. As mentioned, we'd want to keep all the duties and responsibilities here and not put those in board policy and just move the election piece to the board policy. So I'm just quickly scanning to make sure the rest of this, this is all part of your board officers section, just to orient everyone where we are. And a lot of this, again, is just restating some of the other appointments that have to be made by the board, chair and vice chair, in terms of board members or staff members that have to serve on any of these various committees that are in statute. But yeah, that's it. So that would be the big piece. The rest of this is just technical in terms of making a comprehensive list.
Okay, so Jeff, will you go back up to the top of this again, of this section? Okay, so I'd be seeking a motion that would include here the changes or the amendments that will be completed. I don't know how you want to say that. So on this section, what's this section called? Just board officers?
Correct.
Okay, Michelle?
Okay, I'll try. I move that we pass section 6, board officers of the bylaws as amended, and move for approval of the full board on second reading.
Just
okay.
approval.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to try and restraight that. It's section 6. I guess I can't see it. That Michelle moves that we, or that the committee moves that we approve section 6 board officers as amended, and move to the full board for final approval. That sounds right. Anybody have questions on that, Lorraine? Was that okay?
Sorry, I'm working between two screens here. Yes, that sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any discussion to that motion?
Nope.
Okay. Seeing none, please vote.
This is like the first time we've had Lorraine with us. She's usually over there with the popular committees. So thank you, Lorraine.
No. Okay. That motion passes unanimously.
Scott, we're the only action that's happening right now.
I know. Hey, I know. I'm grateful to be on this.
The only game in town. And Miss Brittany, we're glad you're here with us. I don't know if you.
Okay, so that's why Lorraine's here. Thanks for clarifying that, Mark.
Maybe we should move up. Are there any other things that we should pass out that maybe are critical to us moving forward right now? Or should we just go back to do we need to go back to the top and approve section by section, or just keep moving on? I think maybe we'll just keep moving on. What do you think, Jeff? What are your thoughts? Should we start, because we are going to have conflict of interest coming up?
Well, these are sections we've already gone by, so I wonder if you also wanted to approve everything that's already been discussed.
Okay, I'm just making sure that we're not waiting on anything. So keep scrolling down and see if there's something. I thought there was something we were going to wait for Michelle to look up for us. Wait, go up one.
It was the conflict of interest thing. I think AII or something like that part, that section. CAII.
I was going to rewrite it. I didn't rewrite it right now. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay, because we can make that motion with the rewrites that you'll do. We can do that.
Okay. I'm sorry. So, I didn't know I was going to do it right now.
So, Jeff, do we have, how many sections do we have? We have section 1, section 2. Oh, so we have 1 to 5, right?
Correct. We've been through 1 through 6 now, but you've approved 6. So 1 through 5, you have not approved any of the changes in those.
Okay. I think if we keep up on that, that will help us to know where we are. So I would be seeking a motion for sections 1 through 5 with the change that Michelle will add. Chair Huntsman, are you?
So moved.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, there's a so moved.
Okay, there's a so moved. Okay, so the motion is that we approve sections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the bylaws and move to the board for final approval. Any questions on, with the correction on section 1C, 1B that AAG use will have prepared. Any questions on that? Seeing none, please vote. Oh, thank you. The voting's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we're on 7. I should have warned everyone that this was going to be a long one today.
Chair, if I may pause actually and just check in with Lorraine and Brittany and see, are there other sections that either of you recall would be, we might want to jump to in case we don't get to everything today?
The one I can think of possibly, again, because you're going to have new leadership that's going to be forming committees, is the audit committee. That's a whole new, there's some different things with that need to be considered.
Let's open that can of worms, Lorraine.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I think you're right, though. So maybe it's the last one on the list here, isn't it?
It's under committees, I believe.
So maybe we could do the whole section of committees, because I don't think there's much change except to, Jeff, maybe start at the top so that we don't miss any chunks that might be of question.
Okay, and I'm sorry if I'm making anyone feel ill. So we'll skip section 7 for right now and jump to section 8, which is board committees and outside committee participation. I'm going to shrink this a little just so everything's fitting on the screen.
That's good.
So we've got the standing committees of the board, and just keep in mind we did include a definition that standing committees is only the 3 standing committees and is not the audit committee, and is not the board executive committee either. So we kind of move through these sections. A lot of this is more cleanup. And technical things like number 7 here, we added this just so we don't accidentally violate the Open and Public Meetings Act. And then we dive into the board audit committee. So I'll preface this section with what we have, and I've been working with Michelle Buse, so I'll credit to Michelle as we've discussed what the statute actually says versus what we have been doing as a board. So I just wanted all of you to be aware that the director of audit position is actually a position that reports directly to the audit committee, not the full board, based on the way that the statute is actually written. So Debbie Davis's position would actually report only to the audit committee, and the audit committee would be responsible for her hiring, her employee evaluations, etc. So that is one thing to be aware of that's currently in statute. So there are some conforming changes that you'll see in this section that actually put the audit committee in charge of her position and her employment specifically, because that is actually how the statute's written. The other piece of this is how the membership of the audit committee is chosen. And the statute actually states that the audit committee membership must be chosen by what is called the appointing authority, which is defined in the code to be the state board. So previously, this would have fallen under committee assignment, that you would have the chair and vice chair choose. The statute actually says that it's either the full board that would need to make those assignments, or that could be delegated, as I've talked to Michelle Buse, to the agency head, which is also defined in the statute to be the elected official or the appointed official that is in charge of setting the policies for the agency, which would be Superintendent Dixon's position, essentially. So as the statute currently reads, the membership selection also goes a little bit different than what we have currently done. So you'll see that reflected in this section, and there may actually even be some sections we need to update with that in mind. But just be aware of that. Currently, that is in code, so we can't change the bylaws to conform directly to how we do everything if it contradicts with the code. that would require statutory change. So you'll see some of those things reflected here on the audit committee. So that may feel substantive, but there's really not a whole lot we can do in terms of in the bylaws until we change that statute if we would want to do that.
Okay, Jeff, stay with audit for a minute.
Okay.
Stay with audit because I think we'll have questions. I think Chair Huntsman has a question, but I have one. When you say it's in code, is it in education code or is it in audit rules code?
So there is an audit section of state statute. So as you can see up in this highlighted section on the screen, 63I-5-301. That whole section, 63I-5, section 300, all the 300s subsequently that follow, is the audit committee section that applies to every state agency, including the State Board of Education. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, so if we wanted to make a change, it would have to be an exception to that statute.
Correct.
Okay. And, okay, I have some more questions, but Miss Lorraine?
Yes, one thing I would note in Board Rule R277116, in talking about the audit committee, it does say audit committee means a standing committee of members appointed by the board in accordance with the board bylaws. So it is out, this is correct the way it's been done in accordance with the board rule that it's outlined in the bylaws who's on the committee.
Okay, Lorraine, you're going to have to help me. Say that again. So
okay.
We've been doing it right or wrong?
It is right, but I'm not sure the board's aware that that's part, that's what the board has put in rule, that in its bylaws is where they'll designate who's on the committee.
Sure, if I can step in as well.
Yeah, Jeff and then Michelle.
Lorraine is correct. We're doing it as the rule is written. I guess what I'm highlighting here is that the rule actually is written in a way that does not correspond with statute. So we would need to make conforming changes in the rule as well.
Or we could just say our rule overrides. Just kidding.
Yeah.
That has not gone well for us in the past.
Michelle, go ahead.
I want to say, try it, Laura. Let's see how far it goes. No. I pulled up the statute, and yeah, the rule is definitely inconsistent because it does say that if we do have an audit committee, then the audit committee shall appoint, evaluate, and if necessary, remove the agency internal audit director. My question is, if the audit committee appoints the internal audit director, would that come to the board for further approval, or would that just be done within the audit committee? That's the clarification I wanted to know.
I can offer an opinion, and I'll also defer to the AAGs to tell me everyone if I am in left field, which tends to happen. But my sense on that would be the audit committee is charged with that in statute. So I don't know that the full board could really override the audit committee at that point. But I'll defer to the AAGs to make sure I am not wrong.
Could we do some sort of an approval there, Michelle, once they appoint?
I agree with Jeff that when the authority is given to a lesser authority than you, that you can't undelegate that authority. The legislature delegated it, kind of overstepped over the state agency's head and delegated it down below them. And so you can't undelegate that from them. They specifically took that from the agency head and moved it down the line. And when you get something, delegate it down yourselves. But when the legislature makes the choice to put it on one of your lower committees, you don't get to go and oversee what they did when that decision was given to them. So I would have to agree with Jeff and say that final decision is the audit committee's.
So I guess, I mean, I don't mind making changes. Is there any other agency like the State Board of Education where a lesser committee would be doing that? Can you think of one?
Every agency that has an audit committee.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Audit committee would be the one that hires their audit director.
Okay. And so it also tells us how we pick our audit committee, right? The board picks the committee.
Correct.
Can the board delegate that to board leadership?
I can't remember that. Can you remember that, Jeff?
It says it can do that to the superintendent, but could they do it to the board?
So the sticking point on this one is you can delegate it to the agency head as defined in that part of the code, but agency head does have a specific definition, and it states that it is somebody who has the authority to make policy for the agency. And this is where I would defer to the AAGs, but my sense is that the board chair alone cannot, in their capacity as board chair, make policy for the whole agency. That would be something that Sid would do in her capacity as a superintendent. So I would view her position to be the agency head, but not the board chair.
Brittany, do you have any comments here? Because I know you've been looking at this for a long time. Any thoughts here, Brittany?
No. When this came up, when we were looking at it, a lot of these same questions came to our mind. You know, we're like, whoa, this is a lot different way of looking at it. So no, I think, you know, just trying to be as close to what the statute is saying would be in our best interest. I know some of it's going to be messier than we're used to, but what do we do? Anyways, I also thought it was interesting in the membership of the audit committee based on the statute. It doesn't necessarily have to be board members from what I'm understanding, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't even have to be board members on that committee.
That is correct. The way that the statute is written, it doesn't say that the appointing authority has to choose amongst its membership for the committee. You just get to pick whomever it is. So if you wanted an outside agency person to serve on your audit committee, based on the way that the statute is written, that is technically allowed.
Okay, so it's kind of silent. I do have a question though, but we can set the process, because I can see this being really messy. We could set the process in our bylaws of how the board would pick the audit members.
Correct.
I have a question also. Because it doesn't outline who specifically is to serve on the audit committee, we could also put within our bylaws that it is limited to board members as well, if that's what we would want. I'm just trying to figure this out.
I would assume yes.
Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't do that.
So do we need to have a process today, or just know we're going to follow this, and then where would process come in time for us to make an audit committee with new people? Maybe we'll have to have a separate meeting just to get a process, or maybe that's all we do right now is present a process to the board next month. This has to get done. I think Lorraine was right. So what are some pieces in the process? I think we should start with that. Scott, do you have a question? No? Brittany, I actually would once again defer to you if we're going to look at a process. Limit board members, limit how they're voted on. Talk to me.
Yeah, I think all of those questions would be important to answer. Maybe the first question to ask would be, could this take place in a closed session, yes or no? And, you know, would it be, you know, similar to like other appointments that we make? Would we be able to do that, or would it have to be an open process? I think would be an interesting first question to ask. Maybe the AAGs could give some information on that.
Okay, and just keep your mic open, Britt. Okay.
I would just chime in by saying if we're talking about individuals by name, then you could close that to the public.
Great.
The process, though, needs to be we need to speak in open session, in an open meeting, all about process. So we got to get through the process piece, which is still a significant hurdle of time and to get everyone's head wrapped around what it looks like with a time frame. And we're going to be losing a significant portion of our board in a month. I don't think you're going to get this done unless you have multiple board meetings.
I have oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just had one quick question. In the past, has it been the board chair and the vice chair or chairs that have appointed audit committee members? Is that how it's been in the past as far as the process goes? And could we keep it that way?
That is what was inherited in the past. Yes, that was the was the practice and is presently the practice.
And if we don't clean these up, could we continue in a poor practice? That's the question. Knowing what we know, can we continue in a poor practice?
Sure, this is Jeff. And I'll defer again. Michelle Buse and I have had some back and forth in emails, but I think one of the problems, to speak to Board Member Bolter's question of, well, can we just then, as a full board, delegate it back to the way that we've always done it? I think that gets a little tricky based on how the terms are defined in the statute. Because currently the appointing authority is the phrase used in the statute, selects the membership. And appointing authority is defined in the statute specifically in a subsection to be the State Board of Education. And personally, and I'll again defer to Michelle, but Michelle Buse, I would assume that unless we change the statute to redefine that for purposes of that particular code, State Board can also mean board chair. I think it's hard to delegate that back to the board chair when it's not clear. But perhaps there is a path that I'm not thinking of.
I felt like the language and the definition said this was one unique committee, that it was the body that made that choice.
Okay, so all of us as a board members would make the appointments to the audit committee or approve them, basically.
That's how I read it. I know that that's different, and I don't mean to upside down your world, but as Jeff and I read through it, it was like, we just want to make sure that we're doing things the way it says. And, you know, we, like Laura said, if we need to seek a statutory amendment that exempts the State Board of Education from that, and that's the way that you want to go, we can. But statutorily, Jeff and I both felt that the reading of the statute was that you as the board was the body that is the appointing body.
Thank you. Brittany, we just talk in here, so just go ahead.
Maybe an idea that might kind of be a hybrid approach would be, what if leaders, because right now leadership usually kind of collects an interest survey, who's interested in which committee, who would like to serve on audit. What if leadership came to the full board in a closed session with a proposal of an audit committee makeup, and then the board could discuss that and then come out and approve it in an open meeting? That way,
that completely fulfills the intent of the law.
Would amendments and changes be able to be made within that closed session? Like if we,
Yeah, so my thought was, would it be similar to other appointments, right? We have a list of possible appointments. There's usually a star next to the recommended one. And we don't have to go with that recommended person. We could, come up with something else, and there'd be a discussion, and, and we'd all be talking about each other and about how much we hate each other. No, just kidding, we wouldn't. But,
or love.
We love each other. No, and so we could have that opportunity to discuss it, and changes could be addressed if necessary during that closed session, or ideas for changes could be addressed. And then the appointment would take place in the open meeting. But then at least the full board has a beginning point, something to work from, to a starting point to have the discussion. So it's not just the other option is just to open up a gladiator ring in the middle and just, sorry, I'm tired.
I'll throw you in.
No, but then there's a starting point to work from that's based on, we know who's interested, first of all, leadership has kind of talked through it and made some other, and maybe they could talk to why they picked those people. Because I know in past experiences with leadership, you try and balance people's requests with, other people's requests. And so you could talk to, well, so-and-so has a really heavy lift over here, and so we decided this person could use this particular assignment here. And so all of that could be brought to the full board during that meeting, and then the full board could either ratify it or suggest changes to it.
So if I'm seeing this right, you'd make suggestions for the audit committee, and then the others who have interest would be listed below.
Yeah.
Yeah, who had put in for interest. Mark, did you have something?
No, I agree. I believe it's a pathway to get us through, get us into January and keep us in compliance. We absolutely we don't like kicking the can down the road when we find ourselves in a compliance situation, and so I appreciate that suggestion, and I think it's very doable to whoever the leadership is in December to go through that sequence of events and then bring something to the board in January in executive session, and then that committee would be filled.
okay, and then any changes basically to the starred people would then have to be done in an open.
Well, all of it has to be in the open. Even the recommended.
In the list, then we would say we would amend so-and-so with so-and-so, but that would have to be done in the open public meeting.
We wouldn't even have to amend, though, Michelle, because the list and would be a discussion just like an appointment, like we had the other day with those two people on it, and everyone said, oh, this one, and no, this one, and so we did this one. And so when it came out of executive, all we did was say that one name.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe just another thought that occurred to me as I was reading the statute is they talk about qualifications of those, what is it about that person that would meet the needs of the audit committee? Because I can't remember the exact wording on what the qualifications of audit committee members should be. But it might be helpful, as board leadership is making their recommendations, to speak to some of the strengths of specific board members and why, that would address that need on the audit committee.
So do we want to list these things, or do we exactly how would we like to put this in here? Just as the process as part of this statute? Or should that be in board policy? Miss Lorraine, you got any suggestions there?
I'm working on it, typing it in.
Yeah, I don't know that you need a policy for it necessarily if there's just a couple of items. One thing I would note that we may need to change board rule. Board rule says the board will determine in its bylaws what the membership is. And right now that's the case. So if we're going to change that to where the board makes a vote, then we need to take those portions out of the bylaws, which says that the board chair and at least one chair, it's items 2 and 3. And then there's other sections in the vice chair and the chair duties and responsibilities that say they'll be members of the audit committee. So we need to make sure we get those deleted as well or removed.
Okay, so we need to delete those, and we also need to fix 116, right?
Yeah, if you don't, yeah, if you're going to do it differently, because right now it just says they'll outline it in the board will outline it in the bylaws.
Okay.
I can bring 116 to this committee in December with corresponding changes.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Do we feel okay that those 3 pieces could be the audit committee membership selection? 16 is open. Is open in, oh, Debbie said 116 is open in law and licensing. So thanks, Debbie. Gosh, I wish I knew as much as you. So maybe we could get them to look at changing that to match what we've been working on. Or we can change it. Maybe we can repeal those pieces as the committee reports out on 116.
Yes, yeah. I think what in that case, thank you, Debbie, for that. I think what we would do is have a separate draft to update those sections that the full board would consider.
Yes.
That a motion in the report out.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. Anybody have any heartburn now with this? Jeff, can you go back and show the whole section again? This part, because this won't be in there yet, but is there any other part of this section that anyone's having heartburn with? Kind of off the page a little, Jeff. Yeah, better.
I have a question with KI, where it's struck out, shall evaluate annually by the members of the board. Is that being moved or is that struck out? And I'm sorry if you explained this, but what was the thinking?
This is actually in relation to Debbie's position. So because the statute states that the evaluation of her performance is actually done by the committee and not the full board. So her performance review would be done by the audit committee.
Okay, thank you. And so it didn't, so that also the same thing? I didn't realize that her performance review also would be done by the audit committee.
Yes, so that's actually part of the statute as well. The audit committee would hire Debbie, and then they are responsible for her evaluation. That's part of that piece of code as well. And Debbie, I apologize if you were finding out you have a slightly different set of bosses than you thought you did in this meeting. An interesting piece of code.
Good thing now she only has to have 5 people bossing her around. Okay, Jeff, keep rolling here.
And I'll just point out, we're now starting to step out of the, as you see in subsection D, we're leaving the audit committee section. So we can keep going on this, or we can go back to section 7 if you would like, or however you'd like to proceed, Chair.
Well, are we out of section 8? I just didn't see when we crossed over.
No, we are not out of section 8, just out of the audit committee section of section 8.
Yeah, let's try and finish section 8 so we can do it as a whole. these are just committees, right, that we serve on?
Correct. So you'll see in this section here, there was a whole part about creating a task force, among other things. And that's all actually a part of Board Policy 1004. So we went ahead and deleted this section and referred to the relevant policy. And that really are the major parts of Section 8 before we jump into Section 9 of board meetings.
Okay, I know we've skipped 7, but I'd be seeking a motion on Section 8.
I move that we approve Section 8 of the bylaws and send to the full board for approval, for final approval.
Okay, as amended, Michelle?
Yes, sorry, as amended.
Okay, so the motion is to approve Section 8 of the bylaws as amended and send to the full board for approval. Any discussion? Please vote. Seriously, something happened to my whole thing and I can't see everybody. Let's see. There we go. I was waiting for Brittany to vote. I guess we don't need Brittany to vote. It looks like maybe Scott had to go off. Okay, so that's unanimous with Scott Nelson not here. Okay, thank you, everyone. That was a heavy lift. Should we go back to 7? What is 7? But I know we had some questions on board meeting requests, but we can get to that next month even. That's okay. Let's go back to 7. Let's try it. Let's just try and
Section 7 is very short. It's just about the compensation for services, and really not a whole lot is changing here. So
is that the whole thing, or do we need to scroll a little bit, Jeff?
That is the whole thing. Just A, B, and C. So that'll be C and D once we make the correction.
Okay, let's go on to another section. Maybe we can do 7 and something else together. And I think depending on what we have, this is probably our last section we're going to get to today.
I think Section 9 is a good one to end with, because I think there's some good, robust discussion to have in this section as well. And we'll start right here. So we made some clarifications in B about when something happens, just kind of made a technical move here to make it read more clearly. I think Section C here in the board meetings part is going to be where we have some good discussion. As you may recall, the current process for getting something on an agenda would be 2 or more board members making a request to board leadership or the executive committee. This changes that to 3 board members and adds that need to be present in order for the item to eventually make it onto an agenda. And those conditions are listed here as A, B, and C. So the item needs to be actionable with the specific action outline. It's identified, it is identified how the item fits with the duties and responsibilities of the board. So it's actually related to something the board has power over. And C, all the requesters are listed for inclusion in the agenda memo. So everyone is aware of who made the request. So I'll just kind of stop now and kind of throw it all out to you in terms of your thoughts and feelings and comments regarding these changes.
Michelle, I know that you wanted to bring something up here. And I actually talked to Jeff a little bit about it on 1A. And Michelle, if I'm speaking out of turn, you let me know. But if we want to have something where we want to just have a discussion, for example, if we wanted to talk about IT security, where would a board member, 2 board members, 3 board members be able to have that presented to the executive committee to be brought forward as a discussion item or as a work work meeting or something like that.
Or like an information item or something.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Lorraine, you're up.
Yeah, so definitely not 100% set on the verbiage of this. The intent was that anytime a board member, a group of board members brings something to the executive committee for an agenda item, that it be very clear what they're trying to accomplish with that. Otherwise, it requires a lot of questioning, trying to get to how does this go on an agenda? What is it going to look like? And so that's the intent of this, is to be as specific as you can. You do your homework. So we're not just throwing out an idea for an agenda item, but you have to be the one that does all the legwork to make it something that's digestible or doable by the board. Does that make sense? And so we differentiated, and I can't remember where we put it, an agenda item from a study session item. Those board members can also suggest ideas, make suggestions for study sessions. And so that's different than an agenda item. And so, yeah, so that would answer that first question you had. As far as like just an information piece, and maybe that would be the same idea as you bring forward an idea of here's something we could have for a study session, and the executive committee could decide, is that big enough for a study session, or is this just an information piece that we could throw on an agenda that's only going to take 10 or 15 minutes? I don't know. But anyway, that was the intent of the wording that we're using, is making sure that board members who are making the request are really putting in the legwork to make it something that the executive committee can easily find how to put that on agenda, and not have to do the work of, well, is this action? If it is action, what would be that proposed action? You know, when we have a board memo, who's going to write that proposed action piece, or what that's going to look like? And so it's just making sure that those requesters do all of that legwork and get it clean and ready to be on an agenda. Does that answer the question?
That's helpful. I think Lorraine has her hand. Did Lorraine have her hand up too, or did she answer your comment, Lorraine?
She answered my comment. I guess now that I have the floor, one thing I could maybe suggest, rather than saying the item is an actionable item, maybe rewrite that in some way, just to make it that something about that the item must be specific as to whether the intent is action, discussion, information.
The intent of the item, perhaps?
Yeah, that it's very specific, not just we want to talk about this, but it's got to be pretty specific as to why it would be coming to the board, why it's relevant to the board. And the case now is that when an item comes to the board executive committee, many times members will ask for it to be an action item, but the executive committee feels it's not quite ready for that yet, that it may need some discussion first. So they may not always put it on an agenda. They still have the authority to change. At least right now, they have done that in practice, to change it from an action item, even though it's required.
B and C are helpful to what they're after in A, if it's action or not. Chair Huntsman?
Well, the specificity, however I'm going to learn to say that word and have it just flow from my lips, is really important. And the biggest challenge, and Brittany, I can speak to it from the last few years, is the fact that we are, it's about managing expectations. What is the what we want to meet board members' expectations, and staff and other people need to prepare for this and want to help and et cetera. And so it's the specificity, or however you say that, is really relevant, and not to be a burden, but to help manage expectations.
I like that. I like that a lot. So the item
in there, I'm not sure, without it being in some kind of intimidating thing.
So how can we change A to the by 3 members, specify if it's action or be specific about your needs. I don't know what can be put there. Wordsmithers.
I just don't want it limited to just an action item, because there may be other reasons why we may want more information on something, or like a presentation. But I like everything else. I think everything else looks good, and I like how let's try to drill down as to the reasoning why we're doing this, to be presented to the executive committee. I just don't know how to put that in there, that it's not limited to just an action item.
What if A said, if the item is actionable, it includes the proposed action? Does that make sense? So then it's not, here's an item, put it on as actionable, but there's no idea of what it is that we're getting to. Does that make sense? So that the requester has to either say, okay, I want this policy changed, and here's the proposed action, or so I was going to say, maybe if the item is actionable, that the specific action is outlined, or the specific proposed action is outlined, so that they've done all that preliminary work to say, here's the policy that needs to be changed, or the suggested direction that I'd like to go, et cetera. Here's the resolution I'd like to see discussed, or so that way that if they want it to be actionable, because then that still leaves the flexibility of the executive committee to either change it to discussion, information, or action, depending on the timing of the item. But if it's an obvious actionable piece, that it's clear what the proposed action, or at least what it is that we're taking action on, would look like.
I definitely like that clarity for an actionable item. I would still like to put somewhere on there that we are still able to bring forward items for information or discussion, or at least have that brought forward to the executive committee.
What about, instead of if the item is actionable, an actionable item must, don't write yet, Jeff, because I'm not real good at this. An actionable item must contain a specific action. Discussion items, or bring a discussion item, something like that. Somebody help.
I mean,
yes.
What if we put B as the first item? It's identified how the item fits with the duties and responsibilities of the board, and then put something like, and whether it's an information, discussion, or action item, something like that.
So can I jump one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
So when I mentioned if an action is actionable, that leaves the door open for any kind of request. So the if just says, if perchance this item, it could be discussion, it could be whatever, but if perchance it does have action, then this is what needs to be included. And so then that way, the assumption is that you can bring forward discussion items and other items of information. However, if it's actionable, please be as specific with the potential action as possible. And I like Lorraine's idea of shifting A and B, because then it kind of adds to that if point and then it leaves it open to other types of requests. My other question to your committee would be, would you consider putting in almost a disclaimer as well, where the executive committee wouldn't accept certain things on the agenda? Is there things that aren't okay to suggest? Like, can I don't know.
Aren't there, I'm not sure that anything can't be asked of the executive committee, but the executive committee could get further clarification. If you get 3 board members, then what couldn't be?
So what if my cousin was selling hot water heaters and I wanted the board to consider replacing all the building's water heaters? Could I request, and I've paid off my buddy next to me. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
This is a totally exaggerated example, but could I force through almost like a vendor spiel onto a board meeting? Or is that is that something we should disallow in our bylaws, or is that even important to discuss? Just a question.
Ooh, vendors. Oh. Coming to our board meeting, that just takes too much time.
Wouldn't it still go under the discretion of the executive committee whether or not to add something?
So that's the question, because this particular part of the bylaws is a shall, and that's what makes it difficult, that there isn't discretion in a shall. And so is there anything specific that we should disallow? Because, if we go to the may side of it, then that just puts it in, you could request something, and depending on leadership, it'll never be on an agenda.
Right.
And so there is some protection for the full board members in that shall piece, but are there things that are just like that the executive committee should have the ability to be like, no, that's not appropriate for a board meeting?
I don't know, because we've had stuff brought that were vendors to finance committee and to other things. So I don't know. I'd be nervous adding something like that, but I don't know.
Sorry, it's a really good question, because I don't know that we should start eliminating, but I also think it gives board executive committee the opportunity to look at those, ask for more questions. Do we need to have something where the board executive committee can look for follow-up information? There's nothing here that tells when and what board agenda it goes on.
I do have a question about the actionable item. I was just wondering if we're going to flip B and A. Is that the intent? And then, B would be A, and then would A, I don't know if A necessarily needs to be B, or if it would just be like a little I underneath A, that if the item is actionable. Does that make sense? So then it would be print A and then print A I. I don't know if that up a bit more.
Would you have a subpart II? Just have a hard time making a list when there's a list of one.
I know.
Does look a bit weird, but oh well, I don't know.
It might need to still stay a B. Okay, anybody else have anything else? Brittany, I'm not really sure how to put eliminations in here unless we don't move this part out today, and we think about it as to what we might consider poor taste for the board to spend their time on. We could just leave it at this today and not pass this out and bring it back. Committee members, what are your thoughts on that?
I would prefer to leave it as is, especially if we're going to think along the terms of possibly adding things that couldn't be put on an agenda. I would hate to pass it out and as rushed if we did that.
Good. Sean, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to rush through it either.
Okay. So I think what we're going to do is maybe we'll hold on this one, but let's go back to section 7, and I'd be looking for a motion.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay.
I move that we accept section 7. As stated, we didn't make very many edits. So can I say with the edits, with current edits, to the board for further review, right?
Well, for final approval.
For final approval.
Okay, so if I restate Sean's motion, it would be to approve Section 7 compensation for services of the board's bylaws and move it to the full board for approval. Do we have any discussion to that? Okay, I'd be seeking your vote then. Okay, that voting's unanimous with Scott Nelson not here. I would ask that we maybe get some help and input on Section 9 as to what maybe would be a list of items that we might need to add that we shouldn't put on a board agenda, that would be either inappropriate or that takes up too much time of the board when maybe somebody else could vet those things at another time. Like the way Brittany said it, things that are illegal. So does anyone have any other questions on these bylaws or anything from our committee today?
And I'm almost done, so let's hurry in Teams and walk through that.
Okay, I'm hearing somebody.
I think it's Mark,
You heard me open my door. I didn't mute. My bad.
Okay. All right. Just making sure. Okay. All right. I appreciate everyone today. We probably won't see you again until after Thanksgiving. So may you be blessed and have a great Thanksgiving. That's what I want to say. Okay.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy lift. Thank you.